Thank you so much, everybody. Good morning and good afternoon, good evening. I am delighted to be here to discuss with you what I feel is a very important topic for all companies and organizations, and that's talent acquisition. And I want to share with you some of the best practices of talent acquisition. Just trying to change my slide here. Bear with me. Okay, there you go. So I would like to review our agenda for the next 60 minutes or so. We'll start with a brief discussion of why talent acquisition is even worth discussing. Then I want to look at what it is, and you may be surprised since we use the words talent acquisition quite liberally. And I feel that to fully understand the best practices of talent acquisition, we also have to look at three important and global hiring trends that are impacting companies and organizations globally. After this, I want to go through a 6-step process for talent acquisition. Following these steps, I hope, can significantly help your company and your organization's talent acquisition effectiveness. And of course, finally, we'll have time for your questions and my answers. So I always like to begin with a bit of an icebreaker, a little bit of humor. So I'll give you a chance to read this. Hopefully put a smile on your face. So seriously now, why discuss talent acquisition? There are always so many applicants for every job, so it is not really necessary to discuss, is it? Actually, human capital is actually the greatest value creator available to organizations. And I'll repeat that because it's really important and sets the stage for our conversation. Human capital is the greatest value creator available to organizations, and we often forget this. For every dollar invested in human capital, $11.39 is added to GDP, gross domestic product. Return on human capital, the value versus the cost, should give a clear signal to CEOs that investing in people can generate value for organizations over time that actually significantly exceeds the initial financial outlay. According to recent information on LinkedIn, 83% of recruiters said that talent is the top priority at their organization, and the majority of teams plan to increase hiring volume over the next year. Also, when you really think about it, when an innovation strikes gold, so any innovation, a new technology, a new development, a new invention, the connection between the value that's created and the team behind the technology gets lost. For example, many of us know the name Mark Zuckerberg as the CEO and founder of Facebook. But what about all of the others who helped create and build this company into what it is today? Surely he didn't do it himself. Leaders therefore must recognize and capture the value of all their resources to succeed, all their resources. So what is talent acquisition? According to Deloitte, talent acquisition may be defined as a strategic approach to identifying, attracting, and onboarding top talent efficiently and effectively to meet, sorry about that, dynamic business needs. I'll repeat it again since I had an interruption. Talent acquisition is a strategic approach to identifying, attracting, and onboarding top talent to efficiently and effectively meet dynamic business needs. Talent acquisition is not recruiting, although they are often used interchangeably. Recruiting is actually, and as you will see this as we go along, recruiting is a subset of talent acquisition. So let's look at these three very important hiring trends that will help provide some context and information around the whole talent acquisition discussion. The first are millennials. And who are millennials? They are the individual, the generation that is born between 1980 and 2000. So they're about 17 to 37-year-olds. And here in the US, according to our census, they are the largest generation in US history. And to give you some context, we all know about baby boomers. Well, there are 77 million baby boomers and 92 million millennials. Baby boomers are the generation born between 1946 and 1964. And they're about 53 to 71 years old right now. As a result, they're retiring every day. Millennials will represent 40% of our workforce by 2020. And by 2025, they will be 75% of our workforce. So like it or not, they're critical to the success and sustainability of your business or organizations. Importantly, they're also the first digital natives. So while many of us are very comfortable with technology, we generally learned it a bit later on in our lives. Millennials were born in the era of omnipresent technology, so it's everywhere for them. They don't know it. They don't know life without technology. And it's been shown that nearly all millennials are permanently attached to their smartphones. And 4 out of 5 even sleep with a phone or have it at the bedside with them. So if you think about it, all of this new generation of workers has extreme implications for businesses, how they run themselves, and of course, talent acquisition. Another hiring trend that's really important in the context of discussing talent acquisition are freelancers. So freelancers, per Forbes magazine, in 2016, they make up 35% now of the US workforce. So it's not insignificant, and they're important, and I think they're increasing every day. According to ArabianBusiness.com, in April 2015, the global contingent labor market is about $2 trillion. And they said that working for one employer is actually a thing of the past. We used to call those people lifers, and I don't think there's many lifers that exist these days. So it has, big implications for talent acquisition and management, of course. The average job duration today is around 4 years. 4 years, and for millennials, they say it's more than half. It's actually half of that. Harvard Business Review called this the rise of the super temp. These days, even professionals like attorneys and CMOs or consultants with world-class education and training are choosing to work independently. And this is happening largely because there are now many more ways to work remotely. There's apps, devices, and actually many websites that match freelancers with jobs. So all of this is making it easier for people to work on their own. In the US, in terms of these websites for freelancers, we have something called Upwork. We have Hourly Nerd. In Australia, they have freelancer.com. And in the Middle East, you have nabesh.com, which was founded in Dubai, which actually has about 100,000 registered users. So any talent acquisition strategy must consider this subset of workers. How might you use them? Or maybe you don't, but you need to be aware of them and think through the implication and impact on your business. Another important hiring trend is the use of technology in the hiring process. While technology may never be able to replace the human factor in human resources, it is taking over certain functions on talent acquisition and management teams. In a survey from the popular career website called careerbuilder.com, It shows that 72% of employers expect that some roles within talent acquisition and human capital management will become completely automated within the next 10 years. Right now, only 1/3 of employers don't use technology automation for recruiting candidates. So only 1/3 don't. That means that 2/3 are using automation in their recruitment processes. And for those employers who automate at least one part of talent acquisition and management, here is what they use the technology for. 53% set up employee benefits, 47% use technology for payroll, 47% use technology for background screening and drug testing, 30% use it for interview scheduling, 29% performance reviews, 26% first day orientation. So you get the picture. 20% use it for the employee referral process. So essentially, there's many ways to incorporate technology in the talent acquisition process. And as we think through our own talent acquisition process, it's important to decide what we might automate, where we might use technology, and where we might never use technology. So, for example, the interview itself, do you want to use technology for that? I don't think it's possible. But anyway, all of this use is predicted to grow and grow and grow, most definitely. So now let's move on to the heart of this presentation, which is a 6-step process, which I will walk you through for talent acquisition. It begins, as it should, with business planning and strategy. You know, all talent acquisition should begin first with an understanding of where your company or organization is heading. What is the strategy? What are your short-term or medium-term goals? This is really important. Some companies use it, do this regularly. Some companies don't, but I think it's really important to think through at a high level, at the highest level within the organization. So once this is understood, you need to look at your current talent, your projected future talent needs, and then the gaps between them. You also need to consider business scenarios that can change your plans and goals, and hopefully be prepared for the unexpected. In terms of the talent gaps, you need to prioritize and think through which positions will be most difficult to fill. They're not all the same. They don't have all the same requirements, etc. So you need to prioritize, take longer time for those more senior positions perhaps, or the ones that require very special and technical skills. Part of the business planning and strategy is also thinking about where you can develop and promote from within. We'll talk more about that later. The process must start at the very top of the organization with the board and C-level executives who are tasked with company strategy and growth plans. And importantly, and sometimes, not necessarily done well, is this must be communicated to the team. So oftentimes things go on in a meeting or in a boardroom and it's not necessarily communicated to the team. So that's really important. Managers and human resources must have a clear understanding of what the plans are. The people who find and hire employees don't necessarily sit in those meetings. So there must be a clear direction for the overall business and the main operating units. So once again, communication is key. Sorry, I have a bit of a cold. Moving along, so once you have your strategy and plans and have thoroughly discussed and communicated them, you can then move on to succession planning, which is my step 2. Succession planning is defined as having the right people in the right positions at the right time. So again, having the right people in the right positions at the right time. We could add perhaps at all levels of the organization. Succession planning is part of sound strategic planning and risk management. And in terms of the risk management, wouldn't you say that having a lack of leadership in a corporation or a lack of an important person in a particular role is quite an unacceptable risk? In fact, another reason why succession planning is so important is that through this process, you prepare internal candidates to take on new and more significant roles. And to be clear, this is always a good thing. The internal candidates, why is it a good thing? Well, the internal candidates, they tend to know your business model, they know your organization goals and the inside culture, and most often they have a set of proven skills that you have seen in play and may be required for them to grow into new positions. Internal candidates know customers, clients, and of course the fellow coworkers. They also have established and strategic relationships with colleagues as well as your company leaders. And again, they might have demonstrated their potential. So generally, through succession planning, you can, you know who the internal potential candidates are, and you can work with them for them to fill, positions of greater, at a higher level. Sorry, I'm just going to take a drink. Succession planning is also cost effective. It has been shown that the average hiring mistake costs 15 times an employee's base salary in hard costs and productivity loss. Succession planning is also cost effective because, as I previously mentioned, insiders are safe bets. Interestingly, Hunt Scanlon, which is a Connecticut-based media company, recently reported that recruiters often advise their clients that have an inside candidate who is 70%, this is important, 70% as strong as the outside choice to hire the insider. Interesting. So planning to backfill critical roles is very important. Additionally, succession planning enhances corporate culture. And why do you suppose that is the case? Well, for several reasons. It shows employees that they have opportunities to grow within the company. If companies grow and develop leaders from within, then the culture of the organization is enhanced and, of course, perpetuated. Sometimes organizations don't want to have a completely insular culture. And in these cases, succession planning may mean planning to bring in new talent to the organization. Let's look at it a different way. Searching outside for talent takes the company away from its core focus and principles. These interruptions also delay progress in the company as it stalls while it's looking for new employees. And this is, of course, even more important when it's senior level employees who have big. So continuously adding new people from the outside brings new ideas, but you have to be careful because it also can mean a dilution of your corporate culture. Each new person changes things ever so slightly, and culture can change as a result. In terms of succession planning, at the very top of the company, it's also important to note that a leader's greatest challenge can be knowing when to step aside. And this must be planned for. For example, at most companies, if a CEO has accomplished what he or she has set out to do, the company's needs will have changed, and the successor will require different skills and experience, as well as maybe even a different personality. So as you can see, succession planning, and we can talk about this, I can do 10 webinars just on succession planning, and I have. It has to be part of the overall talent acquisition process. And to summarize, this step in talent acquisition involves understanding your current workforce. It also means looking at attrition risk, retiree risk, and simple departure risk. And from here, succession planning means filling not only current gaps, but anticipating future needs and preparing accordingly. Continuing through our 6-step talent acquisition process, step 3 is employment branding. And before any large or any scale, actually, talent acquisition process, you need to look at employment branding. And what does this mean? Well, simply, it means the market's perception of what it's like to work at your organization or your company. Sometimes we don't really think about this, but it's really important, especially in these days of complete transparency online. So how do you manage this? Within your company, you need to ask yourself some questions. Why would someone want to work in your company? What is the perception of your company in the marketplace? Are you on social media? Do you engage with your clients, employees, and is that successful? What would your current employees say about your company? What would former employees say? And again, the answers to these questions are more available these days because people take to the internet to voice their opinions. In fact, there's a website that you may be familiar with. It's called glassdoor.com. Very popular. It was developed to allow employees and former employees to review and comment on how it is to work at a particular company. So they rate companies when, either employees leave or they might be there, and, it's available and visible to anybody. And as another example of the importance of employment branding, I'm sure you heard about last week's problem at United Airlines where a passenger was forced off a flight. It's gotten a lot of press and everyone's talking about it online. So based on this event, do you think people will think twice about applying for jobs there? How does this mishap affect their recruiting? Maybe it doesn't have an impact, but it's important to be aware of it, think about it, and hopefully manage it. Employment branding is also your company place to. What is your Facebook page like? What about Twitter, LinkedIn? I was recently speaking to the Chief Human Resources Officer of one of the largest banks here in North America, and I commented that her LinkedIn profile did not highlight her jobs or accomplishments, so it looked rather unusual in that way. And she told me that because she was a CHRO of this very large organization, her LinkedIn profile was used more as a recruitment piece for her company, to display and illustrate why someone would want to work there, rather than for her own personal career reasons. This was amazing to me, and I thought this was a great example of employment branding. Excuse me. So step 4 in the talent acquisition process is what I think is the fun stuff, recruitment. So remember how I previously mentioned that recruitment is often used interchangeably with talent acquisition, but they're actually very different. As I mentioned, recruitment is really a subset of talent acquisition, and recruitment can take many forms, and now I want to look at just a few of these. One way that companies or organizations recruit new employees is through referrals, and they can be from employees or service providers or even clients. Now, referrals work. Most research says that employee referrals are the #1 source of hiring volume. Again, referrals, the #1 source of hiring volume. And in terms of time to fill a role, referrals are the #1 fastest time. It's been shown that referrals generally take 29 days to fill a role versus 39 days for job boards and 45 days for career sites. In terms of measuring the success of referrals, it's been shown that retention, a very important measurement, retention after 1 year in the job is 46%. This is compared to 33% from career sites and 22% from job boards. So referrals cost less than job boards, and recruiters, candidates tend to be a better fit. And if you think about it, who better to know a company's culture than its employees? So I think when they refer, new employees, the fit tends to be better. A second form of recruitment is on campus. On-campus recruiting is typical for entry-level positions and actually for even like pre-entry, so internships, for example. On-campus recruitment is, of course, free, but the best students will always be in demand and have options. So with on-campus recruitment, you must be creative, you must position yourself well, and somehow be at the front and center of the pack in order to be successful in recruiting the best students. You may not always be in the same city as the campus on which you're recruiting, so the use of video and Skype interviewing can help expedite the process and, of course, can help with cost management. Number 3 is, of course, a very important form and method of recruiting, and that's both, I put these two together, online job sites and your company's own webpage. Posting your open position online, of course, can yield candidates. The issue is it just may yield too many and those that are not qualified. You get an onslaught of resumes and cover letters of anybody who's looking for a job, and that can be very challenging to deal with. That being said, it's still a very popular recruiting technique or tool. Some of the more effective and popular job boards are, of course, LinkedIn, Monster.com, which has been around for a long time. There's a website called Indeed.com, which actually aggregates job postings from other job boards. And I may pronounce this wrong, but there's bot.com, which has, I think, 12 regional offices in places like Kuwait, Oman, and Dubai. Company web pages are also, of course, very frequently used for recruitment. For larger companies, the website includes information not only on jobs that are open, but also on company benefits. There's information on culture, internships, and other helpful tips about working for this particular company. And I thought I'd throw in a fun fact that I am aware of. Reports indicate that Google receives on their website, through their website, over 1 million resumes a year. So of course it can be very effective, but who has the capacity to deal with this many resumes? Of course, it's probably automated at Google. You can also use your own industry associations and groups for recruitment. So there's a number, as you may know, in your own particular industry or geography. There's professional associations that focus either on a specific industry or a specific role across different industry verticals. Many of these associations, are large enough to have national chapters, local chapters, and I'll give you a couple of examples. So there's the AMA, which is the American, where jobs are posted. There's also this they all have acronyms, CSCMP, which is the Council of Supply Chain Management Professionals, which has a career center with not only jobs, but a section for internships as well. In terms of industry associations, one example is the National Association of Manufacturers, the NAM, which has a career section. So you get the picture. You can post your jobs through these particular associations, and it might be actually much more effective than posting on a general job board. Finally, recruitment can take place through the use of recruiters who are either contingency or retained. And I'll just clarify briefly the difference. So a contingency recruiter earns a fee only when the organization hires someone. A retained search consultant, on the other hand, is paid in advance to conduct a search that usually results in a hiring, but not always. So they're more like really consultants. Retained recruiters usually get involved in more senior level searches. And recruiters do have a cost associated with them. So I thought I would just tell you a couple of the advantages of using them. With a recruiter, you can draw up your most challenging wish list of skills and experiences for a particular role, and the recruiter will be tasked with finding these people. You can also gain access to the hidden job market, and those are candidates who are not actually looking for a job, but who nevertheless may be interested in your opportunity. You know, the recruiter will go out and find these people who are happily and gainfully employed and not in the job market. A recruiter can provide you as well with valuable insight into your company and its culture, and improve your chances of a successful hire by giving you some outside feedback about this. A recruiter can also maintain your company's confidentiality, just in case you need to look for a new recruit while the old person is still in the job. When using a recruiter, though, it's important to know what you're paying for. This is really important because a lot of companies, I see it, they don't really understand what they're supposed to get and what they're supposed to ask for. So it's really important to understand what you're paying for, what the deliverables are, and manage the process. So for example, it might include a calendar with target hire dates. So you don't want your searches to go on forever. You want to have a target hire date. You want to have a budget. What exactly is this going to cost? And also, importantly, you should know what your guarantee is. What guarantee is your recruiter providing? For example, I usually offer a 12-month replacement guarantee for my searches, which means that if a person leaves on their own or is fired, I find the company a replacement. So we've looked at your strategy, plan for succession, understood how your company is perceived in the marketplace, and moved on to recruiting, and you're done, right? Wrong. The next two steps in the talent acquisition process can really make or break your success and the overall, the process, whether it's successful or not. Many companies, again, and recruiters, even recruiters feel that they're done. The hire is made and they're done, and how wrong they are. Onboarding and subsequently providing the tools to succeed, again, can really make or break even the most stellar hire. It's important, very important, to be thoughtful and deliberate about the first few months with your new employee. The role of onboarding is to provide the newly hired employee with the tools that he or she needs to be successful in his or her position. And to onboard well means that you must explain everything, phrasing, jargon. Every company, every industry has their own language, their own acronyms, their own jargon, and it's really important to explain this and not take it for granted that the new employee will know what you're talking about and what it even is. It may also seem obvious, but as part of onboarding, it's really important to give the new employee a tour. I mean, this seems so basic, but they need to know where the bathroom is, where the kitchen, the water cooler. These are very small things, but it helps a person adjust and acclimatize to your organization. Culture is not easy to understand, so you need to share the ways in which your company interacts. Let the new hire know about any events or gatherings that help shape your company's culture. In any company, there is a formal power structure that can be understood from the organizational chart, but there's also a very important informal power structure that's really hard to understand, and it's hard for a new employee to figure out. So it's helpful, therefore, to give insights into how this works in your organization. You need to, and again, describe the hierarchy of the company, who reports to whom, etc. It's also good to help them understand meeting dynamics. So they're going to go to a meeting, they're going to sit there, probably be quiet for the first few meetings, but it's important to debrief after and address some of the finer points of the relationships between the people that an outsider would have no way of knowing. Technology, of course, you need to help the new, with onboarding, technology explanation, software, hardware, networks, the cloud, protocols, very important protocols. Cybersecurity is a big issue in companies these days, and any new employee needs to understand what they're supposed to do to protect information and data. Every company has different protocols about this, and most of us are really not experts. So basically, onboarding can take a while, but eventually, the person hopefully understands what they need in order to, to do their job, and gets integrated in the organization. And then, we move on to management, which basically, should involve setting expectations early on and letting your recruit know how they will be evaluated. It's very important. They need to know what the expectations are and how they're going to be evaluated and when. The idea of a new employee hitting the ground running is really not so true. If you hit the ground running, you often fall on your face. So onboarding, management, very important for the success of your talent acquisition process. So finally, step 6, metrics. How do you know your talent acquisition process is a good one? There are parts of it you can measure and others that you cannot. So basically, the idea should be measure what you can. And here are some things that you could measure that will help you understand the success of your talent acquisition process. How many applicants per posting? Ideally, you want enough applicants to have a choice. Oftentimes, as I mentioned earlier, when you post a job publicly, you get too many applicants. You get resumes from anyone looking for a job. So a good talent acquisition process will look at this and refine accordingly. They may decide to put, a job posting somewhere else, or not post at all, or change the way the description is so that many unqualified people don't apply. There's also time to fill. How long are your positions staying open? There are, of course, going to be differences depending on the level and type of position, but your time to fill should either be getting lower and or beating industry or functional averages that you might be able to find for your particular industry or function. The cost per hire is, of course, very important. It needs to be measured and monitored. Hiring can be very expensive, particularly for job advertising and, of course, when using a recruiter. Retention is another metric. Knowing how long new hires stay can be an indication of your recruiting performance, and of course can be used as a basis for future hiring decisions. And by the way, new employees or new potential employees like to know whether there's turnover in an organization. So this is a very important metric and should be measured regularly. Nobody wants their company to be a revolving door. It's not good for the employees, as I mentioned, but of course managers, leaders, they have a very hard time with revolving door type situations. So retention is an important metric you need to measure and of course always improve upon. And then finally, manager and leadership satisfaction and evaluation. Talent acquisition must serve the needs of management at the end of the day and the leadership of the company or organization. Reaching out to these individuals, so it might be human resources, the human resources department or talent acquisition department, reaching out to these individuals to understand their satisfaction or lack thereof. And that can be very helpful to understand, what the talent acquisition process, what needs to be changed, what works well, what can be tweaked, and so on. So I hope that you've seen basically that talent acquisition essentially has graduated from simple candidate filling function to really a strategic arm of any business or organization that has direct correlation to the organization's bottom line. Talent acquisition incorporated into the company strategy and plans is really, a format for success. Talent acquisition involves workforce planning, as we saw. It's proactive, it's strategic. It also leverages your company's internal talent, and it helps talented staff in your organization to grow, develop, and ultimately take on larger roles within the organization. And basically, talent acquisition, I would say, is a necessary component of any company's business processes and practices. And it can be done well, it can be done not so well, and that has, vast implications for your organization. And I hope that I've given you some tools and a better understanding about how you might, improve this process in your own organizations and companies. And I think now we're going to move on to questions and answers.
Well, thank you very much for a very, very intriguing session. And folks, we are now open for question and answer. So if you have any questions, you could either put it in the question box, or you could equally raise your hand. There's a hand icon available on the webinar console. So if you click on it, you can speak directly to the speaker. But let me go straight to the question box. There's the first question. What if my company does not have much of a budget for talent? What if my company does not have much of a budget for talent acquisition? What can we do for free or on a limited budget?
So that's a really good question. And, I hear this a lot from smaller and more, mid-sized companies and startups, where the budget for talent acquisition may be non-existent. And I think in these cases, you need to use your HR department if you have one, or your HR person. So human resources should be able to be very helpful with talent acquisition. It's only one part of what they may do, but you need to rely on them when you do have a limited budget, and find out what they know, who, they might have a database, they might have people that they know, they might have preferred job boards and processes, that don't cost much in order to get new talent. There's, of course, as I mentioned, also free job boards and industry associations. So those things are free to use. And if there's no budget or a little budget, that could be, your first choice.
Thank you very much. There's another one. I work in human resources and I can't seem to convince my CEO and other senior leaders to focus on talent acquisition. They say it is easy with so many resumes always coming in the door. How can I change their mindsets?
Yeah, fun. That's a lot of fun to try to do. So I think, CEOs and senior leaders understand measurable items. So things that they can measure in terms of dollars and cents, for example. So you may want to, for example, tell them, show them how long it takes to sift through the hundreds of resumes you receive each week, and how ineffective it might be. You might want to show them, in terms of hours to do this. He or she may also appreciate looking at job advertisements. Many companies that do this kind of work actually show what it costs and what you might get. You may want to talk practicalities of what a recruiter may actually charge and why that might be a good use of money. It may allow you as a human resources person to do your job and not spend all your time going through resumes. So I feel like bottom line, leadership needs to know tangible, measurable reasons why they should spend any money or any time on talent acquisition. And to the extent that you can do this, I think you would be more successful in showing them, why it's important.
Okay. Another one. with the invent of online recruitment portals, LinkedIn, and so many resumes always accessible, do you think it is making the whole process of recruitment more challenging and complex than giving ease to hire the right talent from this information overflux?
You know, I think in general it's making things easier. And the reason for that is because, you know, many people, not everyone, are, for example, on LinkedIn. And in the good old days when I started recruiting, you know, we didn't have the internet even. We had to basically call people and get their resume, usually through the mail. So think about all the, you know, how long that would take. And once we got their resume, they may not even like fit our job. So right now you get, you know, a quick fix by looking on LinkedIn, for example, most, you know, for many jobs or for many, you know, people, and seeing, you know, who's out there, what they look like. I mean, you don't, of course, you can't believe everything you read on LinkedIn. So you have to do a lot of due diligence and homework, and make sure that the person fits. But LinkedIn, and any other sites are a really good starting point for understanding a person's background and deciding whether you want to, you know, have a conversation with them to learn more. So I use LinkedIn only as a first step. And I ask people, send me your resume. And they'll say, well, you know, it's on LinkedIn. And I'm like, no, I want the official version, because people tend to put more information on LinkedIn than they have out there. So I think, you know, to answer the question, I think it's all helpful. It allows people to come out from the shadows and show themselves. And if they're not out there publicly, you know, they may not actually get the calls for the jobs. So yeah, I think it's all good.
Thank you very much. Another one. Any quick tips can you give to assess the personality preferences and traits of individuals by just having a quick glance over their resumes and CVs?
Yes, I think, you know, that documentation is very important, and I can tell a lot by just looking at a CV. So, for example, there are people who, first of all, I mean, the first, you know, very important thing is, are there any errors, typing errors, grammatical errors, things like that? Errors on a CV or a resume are a big red flag, because if you don't take care to make that document perfect, what are you going to be like within, you know, the organization in your job? So for me, it sends a message that the person has not as much attention to detail as I would like. I think other things are very important. So of course, on a CV or resume, you can see if there's any gaps in a person's employment history. I always go through and see if there are any gaps. So where does one job end and where does the next begin? And if there are gaps, of course, I want to discuss it and understand where the person was. And there are legitimate reasons for gaps. You know, some people, and actually it's become more common for people to take some time off for family reasons, or maybe they just want to travel. So that's okay. But I think, you know, as a recruiter or a hiring manager, you need to be aware that you need to check for this and make sure there's nothing wrong. Job hopping is another thing you can see on a resume easily. So as we discussed, millennials are staying in jobs, you know, for far less time. So we need to adjust the way we think about this depending on the person. But I think, you know, if you see somebody who goes from job to job, it would be important to understand why. And then, you know, the way some people, for example, also make a CV that's 10 pages long. That for me is another red flag. I think too much information is no good. That means that they don't know how to be concise. They may not know how to select what's important in their background, and that has implications for the way they do their job. So there's a lot of you know, things that you can get from that simple document. Also the style, you know, I like simple, you know, with some white space, easy to read, easy to understand, not too many, you know, fancy colors. And unless I was looking for a graphic designer, you know, I want a simple chronological resume. So if people don't understand sort of the rules of resume writing and haven't paid attention to that, I think that's important and telling as well. So those are some, you know, sort of quick thoughts on what you can get out of those documents.
Thank you very much. One last question. Do you find psychometric tools productive and effective in screening personalities and matching them against the job profiles?
I think the short answer is yes, but I think it depends on the situation. I think, as we talked about, there's no complete replacement for the human part of human resources. So I think psychometric testing can be additive in the process, and I think very valuable. But I think you have to complement that with, the human recruiter or talent acquisition manager and their own insights. There's no, sort of excuse or shortcut for experience recruiting. But I definitely see a rise in psychometric testing. There are so many new tools out there. Some of them, you can do on your iPhone. And I think they're very valuable and can provide some additional details, but I don't think they're the only thing that you use in the talent acquisition or hiring process.
Thank you very much. And that really brings us towards the end of the webinar. Patricia, any concluding remarks that you would like to give before we dismiss out?
No, I think I said it all, and I hope it's been helpful and it's been delightful to do this. And you can always reach me. I'll go to the last slide. If you have any further questions, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to answer anything that, may be unclear from this presentation, and I thank you for the opportunity.
Well, thank you very much. And I really want to thank you on behalf of Madinah Institute for Leadership and Entrepreneurship, and for taking the time to deliver this valuable information. So thank you very much once again. And thank you all of those who attended this webinar. We are recording it. Please stay tuned to webinar.mile.org to learn about our upcoming programs, webinars, or to access our archive depositories. So with that note, I would like to end and conclude. So you all have a good day, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're calling. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you.